Lantern Rite 2025. Another year, another free Liyue 4-star. I can already smell the inevitable wave of parrots for the same agenda for yet another year. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, screw that. Obviously, picking one quote-unquote wrong 4-star because you followed some outdated advice isn't the end of the world, but my real concern is helping newer players see beyond the tunnel vision perspectives of old and actually build their accounts effectively according to their own preferences. Newer players, I'm here to give a fresh, honest look at every 4-star unit and their constellations available this Lantern Rite, grounded in what's actually good in 2025, so you can make a more informed decision. Let's dive in. We'll first cover all the characters that are unfortunately not very good. That said, you can certainly make them work if you genuinely like one of them, and some of their constellations will indeed help. Xinyan has one of the most self-conflicting and directionless kits in the entire game. If you truly want to use her, you're definitely best off employing her as an on-field DPS. While she does offer a weak shield and some off-field pyro application, her supported qualities are so lackluster that I can't recommend them in good faith. But as a DPS, whether it's physical or preferably pyro with a C6 Bennett, Xinyan can function decently enough at C0. The only constellation of real importance for her is the C6, which grants a significant damage increase to her normal and charge attacks. Chongyun is primarily a quick swap damage dealer who can put out some reasonably cool numbers when you manage to melt his burst, wherever you decide to slot him in. Furthermore, he also provides the only external cryo infusion in the entire game, which can be pretty fun for some meme teams, I guess. Especially if you happen to have a C6 Shenhe. Yeah, that statement in itself is almost a joke, but it's a thing that people can and will do. Constellations-wise, Chongyun's C2 offers a minor party-wide elemental skill cooldown reduction, which benefits all of his teams in minor ways, while C3 and C6 both boost his burst damage. He's straightforward, serviceable, and quite versatile if you like his style. Ningguang is the OG attack scaling Geo DPS. She can either serve as your main on-field DPS, spamming her charged attacks, or fill a quick swap role on a Geo team alongside someone like Navia, where her elemental burst and skill contribute most of her value and provide a small Geo damage buff. Ningguang's C2 improves her supportive utility somewhat by allowing you to recast her skill after using her burst, while her C3 and C6 both offer decent personal damage increases. She's not great, but certainly workable if you enjoy her rather delectable design, if you know what I'm talking about. Beidou is a fairly strong Electro sub-DPS in the right situations, and also brings along some defensive utility. Unfortunately, she's severely limited by her elemental burst, which constitutes the entirety of her value and looks amazing on paper, but it only functions against two or a few enemies that remain reasonably close together the entire time. Her high energy cost and inconsistent energy generation also forces you to run another Electro character as a battery. That said, against exactly two targets that stay close, a well-invested Beidou can deal some unironically impressive damage. Beidou also has one of the few parry-like skills in the game. It's conceptually very cool and can dish out a big number with the right buffs, but it's clearly an early design that isn't too practical or conducive to consistent energy generation in practice. Beidou's constellations are generally quite helpful. C2 massively increases her multi-target damage by adding more lightning chains to her burst, although this does nothing against a single boss. C5 adds more levels to her burst, which is always nice, and C6 provides Electro Resistance Shred, helping both her and any Electro teammate you choose to pair her with. Yanfei is the first Pyro main DPS on this selector, dealing damage mostly through vaporizing or melting her burst and charged attacks. While she's not that great, especially compared to the numerous cracked 5-stars that fill her exact role, Yanfei can still use the same suite of disproportionately strong supports that bolster all Pyro carries. Therefore, with proper investment into her teams over time, you can make Yanfei genuinely quite impressive. None of her constellations are too game-changing, but C1 offers a nice quality of life improvement by easing stamina consumption, and C6 provides a solid damage increase. Yanfei can also generate a Pyro shield at C4 when using her burst, though its energy dependency makes it less than ideal compared to the numerous other shielders as a universal option. Consider that shield more of a quality of life improvement for Yanfei's own DPS setups rather than as a serious support capability. Yunjin is a support who simply buffs normal attacks, and she's pretty good at that one thing. However, there are plenty of busted supports in the game who do a lot more than just buff normal attacks with a lot less issues, so Yunjin is unfortunately not the most desirable even in teams that focus on normal attack damage. She also generates very little energy and has a huge burst cost, making her a bit bricked in many of the teams where she's supposed to shine. To work around this, I strongly recommend pairing her with another Geo character who can generate particles and do something else useful, such as Xiangling or Chiori for example, and using them together with a normal attack damage dealer. This is easily Yunjin's best use case and how you can have the best experience playing her. Yunjin's notable constellations include her C2, C3, and C6, all of which improve her buffing utility for normal attacks. They're very helpful, but not too transformative. In this section, we'll discuss characters who are generally stronger than the previous selection, and can potentially offer more solid use cases for your account. Gaming, like Yanfei, is another 4-star Pyro DPS, except he does all of his damage by vaporizing or melting his special plunge attacks. He also outdamages Yanfei in general, and I do believe him to be the strongest 4-star DPS in the game. That said, Gaming suffers the same injustice as Yanfei, in that there are multiple Pyro 5-star vape or melt DPS characters who are all better in the same role. But hey, their existence doesn't make Gaming himself any worse, and he's certainly good enough that I would encourage you to pick him up if you find him more fun than the 5-stars. He will not disappoint and can take your account to great heights if you genuinely enjoy his gameplay and wish to invest in his best teams. In terms of constellations worth pursuing, both C3 and C6 provide very impressive boosts to Gaming's damage, but arguably more importantly, his C4 also provides a crucial energy refund, which noticeably alleviates his rather harsh energy situation. Yaoyao is a simple Dendro healer who provides a bit of a healing through her elemental skill while off-field, but offers a massive amount of healing with her elemental burst while on-field. Her most impressive use case is in Nilou Bloom teams, where she has ample time to cast her elemental burst and remain on-field to fully unleash her healing potential. She's so effective here that she's actually the healer I personally use for my Nilou teams, despite only being level 70. Outside of Nilou teams, she can serve as both the Dendro Resonance partner and healer for Alhaitham or Tighnari if you don't have Nahida, and she's also a good option for other teams that do not demand rapid Dendro application from her, such as in Aggravate teams. Just remember that Electro DPSs like Florind have multiple great team options beyond just Aggravate at this point. If you're looking to force an Aggravate team with, say, Florind, Yaoyao, and a C0 official, when you have a perfectly good Chevreuse sitting on the bench, please reconsider your choices. In all of her best use cases, Yaoyao doesn't really need constellations at all. Her constellations mostly increase her healing, which is already sufficient at C0 if you can use her burst and keep her on field for a bit. The Dendro damage bonus from her C1 might be nice for someone like Alhaitham, but that's about it. The additional Dendro application from her C6 should not be doing something super significant for your team. I am so going to enjoy myself with this section, so listen up. Out of everyone on this year's selector, Xingqiu has lost by far the most value since his normal attack driven, single target, off-field Hydra application just isn't as in demand anymore, thanks to all these stellar new characters and team archetypes that just couldn't care less about it. If you are a newer player, Xingqiu's best use case is in a Dendro team with Alhaitham, Nahida, or Nilou, assuming you pulled one of those 5-stars early. But don't delude yourself, Bloom-centric Dendro teams aren't that great by today's standards to begin with, and they absolutely suck without a dedicated 5-star designed around them. Being forced to play an all 4-star Hyperbloom team in today's Abyss is a fate nobody deserves, except for that one GigaChat C6 Kale main. You get a pass because you seem to enjoy it. Xingqiu can also be a useful placeholder in Electrocharge teams if you have a Kazuha, but no Furina or some other better Hydro unit. For Pyro DPSs like Arlecchino though, don't assume that running Vape with a non-C6 Xingqiu is automatically worth it. It can be, but there are also plenty of amazing alternatives now, like Melt with the upcoming Seat Lolly, or unreacted quote-unquote mono pyro teams. Well, it's not mono pyro with Chevreuse, but unreacted pyro damage teams with Chevreuse, who will be on banner very soon, by the way, or combos involving Xiangling, Kazuha, Chiori, whatever. The only pyro character that genuinely prioritizes having Xingqiu is Hu Tao, and that's only if you don't already have Yelan. No, Xingqiu will never be better than Yelan for Hu Tao, whether he's C6 or not, solo Hydra or alongside Farina. Anyone who suggests otherwise does not play Hu Tao. And if he's not C6, I question the need to go double Hydra with Yelan when you could just run Vivi Vape, Bennett Shilinen, or something else with only Yelan for more damage. Sure, Xingqiu brings some defensive utility, but I don't think it's all that valuable for Hu Tao, who already has innate interruption resistance, 30k HP, and constant healing from Bennett. I used Hu Tao as the example, but with the abundance of defensive utility on so many great supports today, this idea stands in general. If you do plan on using Xingqiu for a legitimate reason, and not because some delusional motherfucker still calls him the best character in the game, you'll certainly want his key constellations. His C2 extends the duration of his burst and shreds Hydra resistance for much better damage and uptime, while his C6 massively improves his DPS and Hydra application by adding extra hits to his burst and granting valuable energy refund. Essentially, C0, C2, and C6 Xingqiu feel like three fundamentally different characters in performance. Yes, I'm being harsh on purpose. Xingqiu is still a solid 4-star, especially at C6, but I am sick of people pretending it's still 2021 and overinflating his value. Sure, you can slot him into any team, but you can also slot Tartaglia into any team for his +1 normal attack and he'll do something useful. Does that make him good or super valuable? No. Obviously, that example is a bit more extreme. But the bottom line is that Xingqiu is no longer a priority pick for any team, and at lower constellations, he's noticeably weaker. And with today's gacha situations, it'll also take longer to gather all of his constellations than it would to just wait for both Farina and Yelan to rerun, possibly more than once, if you really want an off-field Hydra unit. So yeah, unless you have a legitimate reason to invest in him, like if you're an aspiring Hu Tao main without Yelan, you can pass on Xingqiu without missing out on anything. He's no longer the obvious pick for Lantern Rite. Xiangling is fucking terrible. Moving on. I'm just kidding. Or am I? If you're still under the impression that any team relying on snapshotting Xiangling in Bennett's buff and dealing a large portion of its damage by vaporizing Pyronado with no ICD is actually good, you are gravely misled. Xiangling isn't some broken free-to-play friendly DPS. She never was. Her damage at C4 and above is fine, but that's about it. If you pull any actual 5-star DPS, preferably released since Fontaine, you'll have a far better time, especially as a newer player. No, National is not a real team for anyone who doesn't have all the relevant 4-star constellations and hasn't spent the past 3 years farming the emblem domain while willfully ignoring everything better than it. Do not try it. There's one exception to that recommendation though. If you're an aspiring Tartaglia main, you will still run Xiangling as a vape DPS. Is she actually better than Mavuika, even in a child team? No. Actually, you know what? Xiangling is better than Mavuika, and you should keep Xiangling over Mavuika for the sake of preserving the international team identity. It's not fair that other international players suffered for 4 years with Xiangling's atrocious issues, only for you to get an easy way out with Mavuika. You're going to invest your life into Xiangling, learn proper rotations, and master triple hitting with Pyronado. You hear me? Alright, jokes aside, Xiangling's best use case for non-child mains is as an off-field pyro applicator. While she's fundamentally not too suited for this role due to energy shenanigans, she and Mavuika are the only 2 characters in the entire game who can actually fulfill it. Mavuika is always better in the relevant situations, contrary to what you might read on Reddit, but if you want to play Mualani or something similar that requires a pyro applicator, while also running Mavuika as her own DPS on another team, Xiangling is, unfortunately, still a very valuable character. You do get her for free though, which is nice. This means the only thing you really want to go after would be her C4, which extends Pyronado by 4 seconds. All in all, you'll still want C4 Xiangling if you plan to run a forward vape or reverse melt team, or something like that. Particularly if Mavuika, who is the better off-field pyro, is already being used as her own DPS on another team, or if you just refuse to get Mavuika for some reason. Otherwise, there's really no reason to look Xiangling's way. The suffering just isn't worth it. We're saving the best for last, aren't we? Lanyan is a brand new character who will be featured on the second phase banners, not alongside Mavuika and Sitali by the way. So if you want her, for some of you at least, the Lantern Rite 4-star selector might be your only shot for a while. Lanyan, to put it shortly, is an Animo Catalyst shielder who provides a surprisingly strong shield, decent personal damage potential, and the ability to run 4-piece Iridescent Venerer and various supportive catalysts, and some of the best grouping we've seen since Kazuha, all at C0. While I don't think she will be broken, her solid offensive attributes combined with reliable shielding make her a genuinely compelling option for a wide range of characters and teams. She's looking strong to say the least, and I expect her to take Zhongli's place in many characters' best shielded teams moving forward. When it comes to constellations, C1 adds extra hits to her elemental skill, which is also what casts her shield by the way, boosting her personal damage, though the usefulness can vary by team. C3 upgrades her shield levels, further strengthening her protective capabilities. C4 lets her buff some EM, adding a nice utility boost in some situations. C6 grants an extra skill charge for her shield, which may feel awkward in some rotations, but certainly will help others, especially those with longer rotations or those that focus on her personal damage somewhat. However, the constellation that intrigues me the most is by far the Constellation 2. Put simply, it can give her the strongest shield in the game, even surpassing Zhongli's, by letting you heal that shield indefinitely via normal attacks on any character. If that sounds ridiculous, well, it kind of is, I guess. If you've ever wanted an unbreakable shield strapped to an Animo Catalyst character, this is what you should keep your eye on. Overall, Lanyan isn't some overpowered must-get, but she's a refreshing new unit who's genuinely good and quite universally useful even at C0. She really does hit a sweet spot between offensive and defensive utility, so if you're looking for an alternative to Zhongli that offers more offensive power, or if you simply want a flexible Animo unit who can hold VV and protect your DPS at the same time, she's definitely worth looking at. If there is a certain character that you really like, you should get them or work towards one of their impactful constellations. If you have a concrete use case in mind for one of these characters, by all means, go for them or aim for a crucial constellation. I will remind you once again that Xingqiu is no longer crucial or meta-defining for the vast majority of players. If you are new, you don't have to prioritize him and follow the outdated agenda that deserved to die long ago. Xiangling, on the other hand, is unfortunately still relevant if you play Mualani like me or something similar, because Mavuika isn't always going to be available and Xiangling is the only alternative. If you have nothing specific in mind, my general recommendation is to pick up Lanyan. She is, above all else, a fresh and exciting character to try out, and she also happens to be an actually good, useful, and fairly universal support who is more likely to be of some benefit to most accounts than anyone else on this lecture. Wow, I actually said that. Sue me. Alright, that's all. I'm gonna go get a nice back pump at the gym, and I hope you go do the same. As always, please take care of yourself. Butterfur out.